within a hidden dungeon. The evil Hunchback of Notre Dame and the Incredible Hulk risk all in a battle for Betty Ross, who is a prisoner of the fiendish Quasimodo.
Catholic Film Club, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Take 3. Welcome to the Catholic Film Club. My name is Michael Coy, and I'm joined by Patrick Bautista.
Bautista.
Beltista? This podcast is brought to you by the Center for Catholic Media at Benedictine College in Atchison, Kansas. And today we're talking about Disney's The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
The cartoon.
Yes, as our fearless leader, Jared Zimmer, calls it.
You have been wanting to do this one for a while. Tell us why.
Well, yeah, I've been wanting to do something about the Hunchback of Notre Dame for about 4 years. So this had better go well, Patrick, or my wife will not hear the end of it. No pressure.
Okay.
How long have you wanted to do this podcast?
I have wanted to do this episode for about like 10, 15 minutes.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Because you just finished like the movie like an hour ago?
Yes, I finished watching the movie about like an hour ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
There's nothing like the first viewing of Hunchback of Notre Dame.
No, there's nothing like the first viewing of any Disney movie. Any really good Disney movie, in my opinion.
You've been revisiting a lot of the Disney classics.
Actually, mostly watching them for the first time.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Because I grew up in a household with all boys, which isn't an excuse because these Disney movies are not intrinsically for men or women or boys or girls or
the
whatever.
Women folk.
I just happened to grow up in a household where we didn't really watch that many Disney movies, so I'm watching them now as an adult, and I'm really loving them.
Yeah,
Huge fan.
I'm kind of the opposite. I grew up, I think Peter Pan was the first movie I ever saw. And I think...
that's a good one.
Yeah. And it kind of... speaking from the boy who really never grew up, that's me right here. And I think The Lion King was the first movie I ever saw in a theater.
Oh, that's a really good one.
Yeah. I wish I had a full memory of it, but I do remember like the impact of it. But this is an underrated Disney movie, but I think it should. I don't even know if it's considered a classic, but I think it really should be.
It kind of seems to me to be one of those movies that really goes under the radar. Like when you think of Disney movies, you probably would not put Hunchback of Notre Dame in your top 5 or top 10. And as a whole, you don't hear a lot about Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Yeah.
You hear it referenced, but like not really the movie itself is engaged with, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of reasons for that. I think one, the overall serious tone and the serious nature of the film can make it tough viewing to just throw on for your kids on like a Saturday afternoon. We've been showing my daughter, she's 2 now. We have 2 daughters now. One's a baby and the other's a toddler.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. But we've been showing her a lot of Disney movies, but The Hunchback of Notre Dame is not one like The Little Mermaid or The Lion King that she would be interested in or be really have any capability of understanding or appreciating. It's more going to be like for the older kids, but it's pretty dark and serious. And I think another reason would be that no, I think that's really the main reason.
Okay.
It's really dark.
This is a really dark movie.
Again, we're at your first viewing. Like what really stood out to you?
I was impressed with, I was shocked at the amount of Christian and Catholic imagery it played with and how it played with it very respectfully and with the story in mind. Like this isn't a movie where I don't believe any of the directors or producers were Catholic. Some may have been, but it's not like a Catholic film, but it's a story that is set within the world of Catholicism and within a Catholic sphere. And so I appreciated that the Catholic imagery, while prominent, is not heavy-handed and is not in a place where it doesn't belong. Like it's not they didn't just make a story and then throw in Catholicism around because where it didn't make sense. So it was used really well.
Yeah, it's not a hodgepodge.
No.
And when there are changes to iconic Catholic imagery, it's deliberate.
Yes.
Yeah, it doesn't seem accidental at all. I think the one thing that everyone can agree about this movie is that the villain is one of the most complex villains in Disney history.
He's also one of the most, I wouldn't say hated, but I know there are a lot of Disney movie fans out there that don't see him as a true Disney villain. Because a lot of the Disney villains, take for example, Scar,
Ursula,
Jafar,
Shere Khan.
Shere Khan. A lot of these, most of the Disney villains have this semi-lighthearted, semi-comedic role within their character. Hades, for example. Hades is hilarious.
Absolutely.
They're all bad, evil villains, but they have their funny moments. They have their humorous moments. They usually have like one song where it's like pretty funny all around. Frollo, you cannot you can try and find a bit of humor, but he really doesn't have any. He's just a straight up bad dude, which isn't to say he's nuanced, because he has a lot of human moments, but he's just a bad dude who is not funny in any sort of way.
No, it's not a love to hate kind of villain.
No, not at all.
But he does have one of the greatest villain songs or villain ballads
Yes.
in Disney history.
One of the most telling and revealing songs.
Hellfire.
Yes.
Which is it almost acts as like a centerpiece within the film, where within that song, he is really giving himself over to the devil. Perhaps unwittingly, but when he says in that song, it's in God's plan that he made the devil so much stronger than a man. If you believe that, then you've given yourself over. I think then you've allowed Satan to kind of grasp you in that way. And what I appreciate about the movie is that it does not. Although you could do a very deep Freudian analysis of Frollo, I don't see it as having a secular view of this. I see it as taking sin in contrast to just wrongdoing very seriously. Like sin as in a crime against God. I see it as taking, like, rather than an affront to societal norms, I would say. But yeah, and voiced unbelievably by Tony Jay.
Yes.
I mean, that baritone is
it's iconic.
It's iconic. There's
absolutely iconic.
Nothing like it.
So I want to kind of segue, because you have seen this movie. When was the first time you saw this movie?
Oh, when I was a kid.
Sure.
When it came out. Probably when it came out.
So it's been like 5 or 8 decades since you've seen this movie.
Yeah. So,
back when you were 80, or you're 80 now.
For every gray hair upon my head, you can count is a year since I've seen Hunchback.
Yes. So I have just seen this movie now. You have had multiple years to sit on this movie and to view it several times. What has been your experience from the time you first saw it, or maybe the first time you remember seeing it, to now? Like, tell us about your journey, whether you liked it at a certain point, disliked it, and different things you've noticed along the way.
Well, I was, of course, taken instantly by the music and the grandeur of the film. And I think it starts out right away.
Yeah.
I could just talk about my perception of just the opening scene. And because as a kid, you're taking in the grandeur of Notre Dame in that first shot, when you see the cathedral rising through the clouds. Well, it has that beauty, and it has that chorus of the the amazing score by Alan Menken. But when you look at it again, you can see that it is setting the scene. It is showing you the perspective from which this movie is told. It's told from heaven's perspective. How you start a movie is incredibly important. You start out in the clouds, and what you see is a cathedral, which is almost acting as a stairway to heaven. It is the only thing in view above the clouds, and then we descend from heaven, and the cathedral is pretty much like the bridge to our fallen world. But I think, like, on first viewing, there's a lot of things that stand out. The serious tone of the story, which, as a brief overview, the plot is that there is this Hunchback of Notre Dame, Quasimodo, and he has been locked away for his entire life in the bell tower of Notre Dame Cathedral by his master Lord, or Judge Lord Claude Frollo. Claude Lord Frollo.
It's a mouthful.
Who, unbeknownst to him, really throughout the entire film, there's never a revelation about this, unbeknownst to him, murdered his mother in cold blood. And during a brief moment of grace, decided to spare Quasimodo's life. The archdeacon comes out, and he stops Frollo from dropping Quasimodo in a well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of intense. I was like, wow, this movie's going places.
I know, very intense.
It's rated G.
I think it must be PG.
I saw that it's rated G. Disney Plus has it rated G, but whatever.
Wow.
You know.
Okay. G for Gargoyles.
Yes.
So your mileage
that's
may
a
vary.
caption right there. Rated G for Gargoyles.
Yeah, and you see, and so he wants to drop Quasimodo down a well. He sees him as a tiny monster, and the well. You could have a few different interpretations of this, but basically he wants to cast him into hell. This is a symbol for something that reaches below the ground, which we find out later. That's where the gypsies live, in the Court of Miracles, in the catacombs of the city.
Yes.
So the archdeacon says stop, and he asks Frollo to confront his own sin. And Clopin, in his narration, his spoken in song, says that he felt a twinge for the first time for his immortal soul. And he looks at these statues, these saints around him. Key being key statues would be the image of the Virgin holding the Christ child, which actually its eyes open at the moment that lightning flashes. And so what you're seeing there is someone's first encounter with, I think it's his first encounter with grace, or at least the first one that we're seeing. It's there's actually no reason that Frollo has to spare Quasimodo than for the fear of his immortal soul.
Yeah, because it's already established that he doesn't have a lot of respect for the church on earth or the ministers of the church.
Yeah. He says,
he literally pushes the archdeacon down a staircase near the end of the movie.
Yes,
so
he does.
He doesn't have a lot of respect for the church on earth.
Yes, but he does have this moment of grace.
Yes.
And it's that moment that keeps you, I think, tethered to Frollo, and it helps you not dismiss him as just some monster with no redeemable features whatsoever. Yes. I mean, there's nothing more frustrating than a villain who has no hope of redemption, who's just painted as a complete monster. You know?
Yeah, I think this movie is full of opportunities for Frollo to face his personal demons and to face his own sins, and it offers him that several redemptive moments. He rejects it every time, which just goes to show like his humanity, that it's not like he's this horrible person who is just pure evil and has no opportunity to reconcile himself. They're there. He just rejects it every time.
Yeah.
From a place of deep brokenness, and whatever turned him into who he is, he's a lost soul.
Yeah.
And it's going to show that he is human, and everyone is redeemable, and everyone can be saved.
Yeah.
If they just take the Lord up on one of those opportunities that gets presented to us constantly.
Yeah, he is a soul himself. He's not the devil.
No.
He's not the devil. And you know, interestingly enough, you see in the imagery of that scene, you see the archdeacon holding Quasimodo's mother in the stance of the Pieta.
I did not realize that.
And so, which is obviously, it's they're switching the symbolism there significantly. It's no longer Mary holding Christ. It's a minister of Christ holding a representation, you could say, of Mary. And how far to read into that? I'm actually not sure. I don't feel I have the response. I don't think it would be responsible for me to say what, but I would invite anyone with a little bit more theological, with a PhD in theology to jump in on this. But,
sure.
But already you're seeing that this is a character who's this is a film that's engaging with faith and sin. And I kind of think, here's my read of the movie.
Sure.
I think that Quasimodo is a representation of faith.
Okay, continue. I'm interested.
And how different characters interact with him shows their faith journey. Not just Frollo, but Esmerelda as well. But it's the most interesting when it's the deepest form of this is how Frollo interacts with him. Because what does he do? This on his first interaction with faith, with finding that he actually does believe in God, he wants to lock it away. He wants to lock it away in the cathedral. And we know as Catholics that it's not about just faith, it's faith and works. It's bringing your faith out into the world as well. And Frollo goes through the motions. In his first interaction in the present day with Quasimodo, you see the symbolism of he interacts with Quasi with setting up wine and bread, and the symbols of the Eucharist.
Frollo and Quasimodo first meet in the present day, at least when the story starts, and Frollo he brings him wine and bread, but he like snaps at Quasimodo to get the plates and the cups and whatnot, and the designated cup and plate for Frollo is like a chalice of some kind, and is some nicer quality material, and the materials for Quasimodo are very bare wood utensils.
Yeah.
And I found it as like a really subtle aspect that they threw in, as to those were given to Quasimodo by Frollo, we know, because that's pretty much his only interaction with the outside world. So it's just another attempt. If I were to read into your interpretation of Quasimodo as faith, we would say that with that scene, that's kind of like a subtle imagery of Frollo oppressing faith and putting down faith as in he is above faith, as in he's better than faith, and he's putting faith in this little category of something that he sees as beneath himself.
Yeah, when in reality it's a gift, and it's a gift that as we've said he's been given, and yet this is what he does with it. And at the end he tries to kill it, and then he succumbs to the fires of hell.
Yep.
You also see their view of the world. And how would you describe their view of the world and their differences of it, if you had to?
Well, I mean, you could argue that Quasimodo looks at the world through rose-colored glasses because he sees everything from a perspective where he doesn't have to engage with it. At least, I mean, it's not his intention. He's been locked away not by his own fault.
That's
but
fair.
He's seeing the world through this bird's eye view. And in his opening song, he talks about his desire to go out and experience it. And he talks about the beauty of it and how he just really wishes that he could go out and be one of them, is I think one of the expressions he uses. And once he does, he has a really negative experience with the outside and the real world. Once again, to not his own fault at all. The world, at least in that scene, rejects him.
Yeah.
And Frollo thus encourages that rejection by not putting a stop to it. And it's only with Esmerelda putting an end to it that the scene ends and his humiliation ends. And for Frollo, yeah, I've mentioned it already. I think he's just like an extremely damaged person, and you could probably find 10 different ways that he got that damage. But he sees the world through this.
The world is cruel. The world is wicked.
Yes. I'm gonna backtrack. And he sees the world, I think, through a Darwinian POV might not be the right one, but almost like a survival of the fittest, oppressor and victim mentality where you have to be strong to survive. You have to cancel out you have to eradicate from yourself a lot of the things that make us human, probably from his own personal rejection, probably from his own negative interactions with the world that made him want to do something like that to Quasimodo. I feel like he's really a terrible, terrible person to Quasimodo, in so much that he sees himself as a father figure in a weird, convoluted way. He sees himself as the savior to Quasimodo,
Which he, in many ways, is.
Yes. What?
He saves, he spares Quasimodo.
He does, yes.
But he puts himself in that position, of course.
He puts himself in that position, but on a base level, there's a clear injustice with forcing somebody to be locked up in a prison, albeit a beautiful prison, but a prison, and seeing that as a good.
Yeah.
And telling himself and telling Quasimodo the lie that you are ugly, you are a monster. He ingrains that into Quasimodo from a very young age. To Quasimodo, when I think he's about 20 years old.
Something like that, yeah.
And when Esmeralda talks to him, he's just like, she's like, you think you're a monster? And he's just like, am I not?
That's right.
And because that is what the truth, according to Frollo, is. And I feel like to tell a lie to somebody like that, you have to part of you almost has to believe that lie about yourself. And maybe that you might think you are ugly. You might think that the world is ugly.
Yeah.
And through that damaged, sorrowful look at humanity, that is what you go and put on everyone else.
Yeah. And isn't it interesting? Frollo is supposedly within the world, but he sees it from an elevated place as well.
Every single scene, he's almost elevated. He's in his castle. When he goes down, he's like, let's go down, physically down to the peasant festival.
Yeah.
And then he goes on his elevated platform.
And isn't it interesting to establish in this adaptation the almost the two towers, if you will, of the Notre Dame Cathedral versus the Hall of Justice, which is an earthly justice and not a cosmic justice.
Yeah, it's a temporal justice. That's really a quite ugly building.
Yeah. It's
when they reveal the is it the palace, the court of justice?
The hall. I believe it's the Hall of Justice.
The Hall of Justice.
It's foreboding.
When I was you hear that image and you're like, oh, this is gonna be cool, and then they reveal it, and it's just this really dumpy looking castle. You're like, ooh,
Ugh. Gives you chills.
Can't imagine anything good goes on there.
But of course, lots of cool things happen there, like torturing prisoners and just lots of fun like party activities, basically.
Yes.
It's funny too that he sees the cathedral as a prison, and it's really his path to ultimate salvation, and it's where Quasimodo lives. He's not in a prison, really. It's only that it kind of purifies Quasi's intentions of wanting to go out into the world. He wants to, I think what the film is depicting is the film wants him to be let loose in the world as faith in the Holy Spirit should be let loose within the world. And at the end of the film, he is welcomed into the city and carried on the shoulders of the people of Paris. And I just think that's just a beautiful piece of symbolism, that faith cannot be contained. It begins in the church, but it can't be contained within the church, within the walls of a cathedral. It lives there, but you bring it out into the world as well.
I kind of want to talk about, we've talked about the allegorical sense of this.
Yeah.
I want to talk about more the literal sense when we talk about beauty, because like the ugly and beauty, and tying that in with sin and goodness.
Yeah.
In the very beginning, you see like Frollo rejecting Quasimodo for his physical appearance, and the perceived ugliness. It's so deep. You could go so deep into this. There's like 100 different things to extrapolate from this, but a person like Frollo seeing a physical deformity as objective ugliness, and also objective from subjective evil and badness. As in, when you say he takes it upon himself to throw things that he perceives as evil into hell, as in his own personal vices and sins, as in Esmerelda, who causes him to sin, as in Quasimodo, who is
and you did that in quotes.
Yes.
Causes him to sin, quote unquote.
In Quasimodo, as he perceives to be, I suppose, like an evil creature sent from hell. So he's like, I will cast him back to where he came from. And the literal theme of this movie is physical beauty versus physical ugliness, which Quasimodo and Esmeralda are, two ends of the same coin. If you take physical appearance, Quasimodo is ugliness, Esmeralda is beauty, and the two of them interacting with each other is a really interesting dynamic.
Yeah,
especially with how they're played against each other.
Well, Frollo's reaction to beauty to Esmeralda's beauty is quite telling as well.
Exactly.
You could go, like I said, major Freudian in this in this film.
Very much so.
But he sees it. He sees everything as something that belongs to himself. He sees ownership over Esmeralda, where Quasimodo, as a man, as a human character within the film, and not as a symbol, sees her presence really as a gift.
Yes,
and
very much.
And it's his. He has a journey to take, and how he responds to this gift, and how this gift is given to him.
Yeah,
because to know someone is a gift, but how you are asked to love is something that takes discernment.
Very much. I feel like a lot of people have a complicated relationship with this movie because it's not the traditional Disney movie or romance story where the protagonist falls in love and ends up with the girl in the end. Quasimodo doesn't get the girl at the end, and I feel like that might upset a lot of people, or that might throw people off.
Right.
But I think in a lot of ways it works because it's what I appreciate about this movie is it shows the nuances of love, and it shows that it doesn't always have to be romantic love. Like Quasimodo is attracted to Esmeralda, A, because of her beauty, but B, because he sees her as this radiant light of joy and of friendship. And what he perceives to be romantic love eventually takes its truest form as, is agape love? Is that filial love?
I actually don't know.
Yeah. Maybe Tom Hoops can correct us on that after the podcast.
Tom?
Hey. But no, Esmeralda ends up with Phoebus, right? His name's Phoebus.
That's right.
Phoebus.
It means sun god.
Yes. Oh, in case you forgot.
It's a great moment. Well, they come out of the cathedral, Phoebus and Esmeralda come out of the cathedral dressed in white. And it's a symbolism. It's a symbol of the sacrament of marriage. And Quasi comes out with them. And the interesting thing here is, that's an interesting thing too. You've got two characters, Phoebus and Esmeralda, who are Esmeralda by being virtue of a Romani, which is a nomadic, inherently nomadic culture, and Phoebus, who hasn't been to the city for 20 years. They're not of the city, but they are now welcomed into the city, and they feel a part of the city, and it's by virtue of them really knowing Quasimodo and him, and he steps out as a symbol of faith again, as I think, and he's welcomed in open arms.
It's quite interesting now that you mention it. You could really start to see not just Quasimodo as the outsider, but Esmeralda and Phoebus as the outsider within their own social constructs of Quasimodo being physically outside the construct of worldly or physical beauty, Esmeralda being outside due to her status as a gypsy woman, and Phoebus being outside his status as a soldier due to his insubordination, his goodness, and Esmeralda being like, you are unlike any soldier I've met, because all the soldiers that she and probably most of Paris has met are hardened soldiers that have very little regard for normal decency or basic human life.
Yeah, no, that's such a great
through
point.
the movie and through their interactions with each other, they all come to terms with their differences, and they come to terms with what makes them all different is what is beauty at the end of the day. And the unifying tissue with this movie is that our differences and all the things that make us different is what will bring us together at the end of the day.
Well, that's one of the most immediately powerful lines of the film when Esmeralda is singing "God Help the Outcasts," and she's praying to a statue of Mary and Christ, and she asks, "Weren't you once an outcast too?" And she's processing past a mural of the Nativity, and yes, he was an outcast at one point, and Mary was as well. In fact, I want to return to that theme of how Mary is woven into the fabric of this story, because it's not even just symbolic; it's narrative. You know, we've seen Quasimodo's mother die on the steps of Notre Dame after banging on the door, begging for sanctuary, because because sanctuary will basically protect her from the earthly justice of Frollo, and she dies, and later on we see Esmeralda enter the church, but she stumbles into her sanctuary, and Phoebus kind of claims sanctuary on her behalf, even though she didn't want to, and yet you see that she has an immediate recognition with the grace that surrounds her once she's accepted this moment of her life. And then she sings that beautiful song, "God Helps the Outcasts." Some of the best power ballads in Disney history, I think, are in this movie.
Yeah, this movie features heavy hitters.
Yes.
Some serious heavy hitters.
There's some
with Disney standards.
Yeah. I don't know about the Gargoyle song where it's like, you're shaped like a croissant is, really fits in that.
Yeah, that kind of made me go like,
okay. A little look askance a little bit. But what we're seeing there is a mirroring of the way that we look at Eve and Mary. But it's kind of reversing the roles a little bit, whereas Mary is the redemption of Eve, and they are interconnected. Well, you're kind of seeing maybe not a you're kind of seeing a reversal where Esmerelda is kind of in that Eve role, or possibly as a Mary Magdalene figure, and the way that she moves through the story is kind of not even a redemption, but it's almost like she gets to live a life that Quasi's mother never got to live.
Like she's the continuation of Quasi's mother.
Yeah, you could see it that way. And these are, like we said, these are symbols that I think that they are used deliberately. And I would invite anyone to quibble with the, you could say that maybe they're too freewheeling in the way that they're inverted, but I don't think that they are inverted irresponsibly from my point of view. But I just think that's really fascinating, looking at Esmerelda, and Quasimodo's mother as a through line through the film, which may be another reason why ultimately Quasimodo and Frollo are preordained not to have a relationship with Esmeralda in the romantic sense. It's a non-romantic love.
Yes.
And yeah, I don't know. Do you see what I'm saying there?
About
the relationship between the two characters.
It's a really nuanced relationship with this character Esmeralda, because you can't take it at face value. You can't just say, oh, Frollo is lusting after Esmeralda and end of story. And you can't say, oh, Quasimodo's in love with Esmeralda and then isn't, and then come to terms with her, and that's the end of the story. No, there's a lot. This is like several onions within onions to unravel here.
Absolutely.
A lot of substance.
Yeah, that'll be in part 6 of our analysis of the Hunchback of Notre Dame.
The sequel to the sequel to the sequel.
Yeah, but again, it's not just the way that she relates. It's not just the way that is important to how Quasimodo relates to her, but how Frollo relates to her.
Yes.
He is interacting with a resurrection, if you will, like a symbolic resurrection of the woman that he killed.
Yeah. You have thoughts, I know, on the relationship between Frollo and Esmeralda, but just as a general overview, I want to highlight how rare it is really for the antagonist to have this really deep-rooted relationship towards the love interest, if you will.
Frollo has this deep he has a romantic desire for a character, and yeah, I think that you're right that you don't see that in many Disney films.
Sure.
And it's uncomfortable. It could be another reason why it's not shown.
It's also very tough to portray that too.
In a G-rated film.
In a G-rated film, which really should not be rated G. I was watching this film like, how is this not like PG-13 at least? Like, this is some serious subject material we're tackling here.
I know.
This is some existential life questions we're getting into. But no, it's a really, it's a cool thing to see a movie sort of made for kids, that, the average child could enjoy, but then also for an adult, for a teenager to watch this movie, and you can really take home a lot of things that are going to make you think about your own perspective on life and about people.
I think so too. I really do.
And about mortality and about the afterlife and about religion and faith. It's a lot of, I don't think it explicitly gives any one solution or answer to the problems, because they're kind of wicked problems to where there's really not one answer or solution to it. But it forces you to ask yourself these questions, and it invites the audience to debate in a respectful manner that, you know, pushes us deeper to dive into these topics.
Yeah. I mean, and to debate in a respectful manner, I think it does offer a solution. I think its solution is to trust in God and follow his will.
Mm-hmm.
And there are clear consequences to refusing grace.
Mm-hmm.
And
True.
the people that are punished in this movie aren't punished because of what they are.
Mm-hmm.
They're punished because of what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And how they, and that refusal of grace. We could even skip to the last scene because there's so much in here, of course, but I want to talk about, like, following the line about Esmerelda and Quasimodo's mother.
Mm-hmm.
When Esmerelda is burning, is
being burned,
burned at the stake
uh-huh.
by Frollo,
Mm-hmm.
and is rescued by Quasimodo. One, I think, in just cinematic terms, and the way that it is, the way that the shots are composed and edited together,
Mm-hmm.
and the way that Quasimodo just leaps and ambles around the cathedral,
Mm-hmm.
is just an unbelievably stirring sequence. And when
Very much.
and he saves her from this symbol of hell that Frollo has created. And Frollo says explicitly that he's going to cast her into hell for doing this. He thinks he has the power to do this.
Yeah.
And he rescues Esmeralda from this funeral pyre, as Frollo puts it, and raises her above the city. And that is a rescue of his mother's soul. That's in the way that he really is a Christ figure.
Mm-hmm.
He goes down in several instances in the movie. He goes down to where the condemned or the damned reside, and he pulls them up.
Mm-hmm.
Like we talked about the Court of Miracles.
Mm-hmm.
They're going, this is where the gypsies live. And he is going down into the catacombs, you know, a symbol of death and hell. And he's there to rescue them. And say he and Phoebus, kind of acting as as dual Christ figures, like two different sides of the same coin, are going down to rescue the souls of the city.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, when Quasimodo rescues Esmeralda and raises her above his head and yells sanctuary, I mean, my heart just can't, is
oh my gosh,
I can't help but be, and I'm more moved by it every time that I see it.
It's tough to not let that get to you.
Yeah.
It's such an emotional scene.
Yeah. And it's just a shame that he can't do the same for Frollo. It's a real tragedy, that this can't be, that Frollo won't allow this to happen. He won't allow himself to be saved.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm just waxing poetic about a movie that
you're going off right now.
I am.
You're on fire. Maybe I shouldn't say that.
Yeah. Well, goodness gracious. There's so much to talk about here. And I want to make sure that we don't sort of browbeat the audience, but
do you want to talk at all about any cons?
Oh,
or do you want to save that for another episode?
There's not really an episode worth of cons. I mean, I don't know what you think about the Gargoyles. Mm-hmm. What was your read on the Gargoyles?
I thought the Gargoyles at least presented a bit of lightheartedness that was needed for this movie. Mm-hmm. I think if you want to talk about browbeaten, a lot of people might dislike this movie just because it's a very somber, dark movie, and we're gonna have to wait for a second because producer Jared is about to walk in the door. And let me start that again.
Well, I'll say here's something that I think works about them. I think the movie goes back on this, but you could see them as an underlining of the deep sadness of Quasimodo, because there are several moments in the movie where they're fully animated cartoons with personalities. And then immediately once someone else walks in the room, they turn to stone. You could look at that in a very depressive way and just be like, wow, this guy is talking to rocks.
Right. Like an almost
Yeah.
semi-schizophrenic manner.
A little bit.
Sure.
Yeah. You could read
I
it
thought
that
about
way.
that too. I was like, ooh,
And
there's something there.
and it rides the line during the siege of Notre Dame when they're getting in on the action and like throwing bricks and things like that. But that was one thing where I was like, okay, that if done another way, I think it could work. And really, your mileage varies on them, but I just think that the tone, especially of Hugo, who's voiced by Jason Alexander, is just, it's wrong. And and their song that comes in the middle of the movie where they're singing like A Guy Like You, and they're just, that's that lighthearted thing, comes at the wrong time in the film. Notre Dame's literally on fire, or Paris is on fire. People have almost been burned to death in a cottage.
Hey, you know what? You got to
And then
find the
suddenly
lightheartedness
we're
within the
doing-
darkness of this world.
We're
you
doing
know?
little acrobatics and pulling out
That's fair.
barbershop quartet stuff. It's a
It
little.
wouldn't be a Disney movie without something like that.
Maybe put it in a different spot.
Sure. I will say, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
You're not wrong that, it's
Okay. So moving
tough
on
to clash.
now that we've established
It's tough to balance the tone of this movie that's very dark and intense. I thought the Gargoyles served their purpose as the comedic relief for this movie. I thought it was well portrayed. Like you said, you can read into their physical realness however much you want to. See it as an extension of Quasimodo's thoughts.
Yeah.
But I thought, at least within, it did a good job of extending and externalizing his own thoughts and emotions while he was alone in the tower. Because I suppose you could only have Quasimodo talk to him, physically talk out loud to himself in the audience, alone in the towers, only to a certain point.
Yeah. Well, I think they also, near the end, they set up a really good line, which is when Quasi has been tied to the pillars of Notre Dame, and he's being held captive and has in many ways given up. He's going through his own Gethsemane moment. They say they're trying to encourage him, and he tells them, leave me alone. And they say, okay, well, we can, because we're just made of stone. We just thought you were made of something stronger.
Yeah.
Which is a really good little Disney
hard-hitting line.
Disney line that just is like, oh, you know what? And
Disney.
Yeah, Quasi
Yes.
breaks his chains.
I actually saw that scene as a biblical draw from Samson.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
In the Bible, I think it's Judges, the book of Judges, or Samuel. Jared?
Where's Samson and Delilah?
In the Bible. Is that
Judges?
Yeah, I got it right. Okay. As fact checked from our lovely boss, Jared, I think it's tough to dispute that it's a direct pull from the story of Samson. Samson is this ultra strong character who is this pillar of faith and has his dark night of the soul. His redemption moment is he's tied to, or his eyes are put out. He's tied, or he's stuck to the pillars of the temple, and with calling upon the Lord and this strength, spiritual and physical strength that he's able to draw from, breaks the chains and the pillars of the temple, and it comes crumbling down. And I was just like, Samson.
Patrick, thank you so much. You're so that is, I can't believe I didn't see it before. Oh,
look, it took me one time. It took you 8, but well,
I guess I was just too caught up in my analysis that Esmerelda is the resurrection of Quasimodo's mother. But
I suppose
I'm
so.
just kind of playing in the sandbox.
It's okay.
Here.
It's okay.
I'm just over here playing with little plastic buckets. But
You're playing with checkers. We're doing chess over here. It's all good.
That's fine. It's fine. Gosh, that's such a great point. I can't believe I didn't see that. It's perfect. It goes. Also, I'm happy that it doesn't totally ruin my it just enriches my view of the movie personally. So
Yeah,
thank
very
you for
much.
pointing that out.
And it's also, once again, it's a good example of doing your research and respecting the research.
Absolutely.
And just playing in a really well executed manner with the material.
Yeah, you're talking about the
doing.
writers.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think like the writers, which I think is Kirk Wise. Well, that would be the director, Kirk Wise and Truesdale. I don't remember his first name. And then huge shout out to the writer Brenda Chapman, who went on to direct The Prince of Egypt. Which I think I would love to hear her perspective on the movie and what she was thinking of when writing the film. Because with this film and her involvement with The Prince of Egypt, you can tell that she has an understanding of faith. And if she didn't in her life, she has the, like all of them have the humility as writers and directors to step into a world and really fully immerse themselves in not just the sort of bric-a-brac around the world, but the true meaning within it. I mean, it's just a beautiful film. I think we could talk so much more about it, but I think we're ready. I think we're good. I think we're good so far. And I really hope that we've I don't know. I really hope our audience goes out and checks out this movie again.
Very much. And to be honest, I think, disagree with me if you want, we've scratched the surface of this conversation. I think this is a movie that's meant to be revisited and just analyzed as much as you want to from whatever perspective you have, and just go into the story, like dive into the characters' relationships with each other, because it's on a basic level, it's just going to be a great conversation to have with a buddy and just talk about, like, this is why movies are here. We get to bring a community together and just engage with the arts and just have a really enriching conversation about it.
Yeah, I've got to find a buddy somewhere so I can talk about this.
Honestly, if you can find somebody to do a podcast with who would be interested in talking about it, let me know. I would hope that can become a reality for you.
Well, should we press record on these mics and then just have the conversation?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, this was the... well, thank you so much for watching. This was the Catholic Film Club, brought to you by the Center for Catholic Media in Atchison, Kansas. And we're going to be bringing weekly discussions on new and classic films like this to you every week. And gosh, finally, I've exercised this demon, I suppose, or this. I've gotten this monkey off of my back. Of I've talked about the Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Do you want a crisp high five for that?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Yes, I want to be in that number when the sea